In this video, we're going to take a look at the volume of prisms and cylinders. The formula for this is the base area times the height. Let's take a look at how prisms and cylinders work. First, we'll start with the prism. So what is the base area? The base area is the area of the base, and the base on a prism is the non-rectangle. Unless you have a rectangular prism, like the first prism on the left there, then any side can be the base. So in that middle prism, that's a triangular prism, the base is not the bottom, it's the triangle. And the last one, the base would have to be the pentagon. The height is no longer how tall something is. The height is the distance between the bases. So in that middle prism, the height is not that leg on the left side of the right triangle. The height would be the distance between the two triangles. Let's take a look at our cylinders now. Cylinders always have the same shapes, so the base is always circles, and your height would then be the distance between the circles. Let's go ahead and backtrack now and take a look at why the formula of base area times height actually works. So here's a rectangular prism. And you have to realize that volume in this shape is the number of cubes. So if we look at this shape, notice if you think of it as having layers, a top layer and a bottom layer, each layer has 12 cubes. There are 2 layers. And so to find the total amount of cubes, you can go 12 times 2 and get 24 cubes. So the 12 is the base area and the height is 2. Let's go ahead and try a problem now. We're going to calculate the volume of this rectangular prism. So again, our volume is base area times height. And we'll go ahead and for our base, use that shaded rectangle on the bottom. So our base area is 10 by 8. Then our height is the distance between the top and the bottom, which is 3. So now we just simplify this and we get 80 times 3, which is 240. Now, what kind of units are we going to use? Well, if we step back to our first line with the numbers, that's 10 inches, 8 inches, and 3 inches. So if we go inches times inches times inches, that would give you inches cubed. So our volume is 240 cubic inches. Now, I said in the beginning that when you have a rectangular prism, you can use whatever you want for the base. Let's take a look at how that works. Let's say I wanted to use that front panel as my base, that 3 by 10 rectangle there. That would lead to 10 by 3 for the base area and the height of 8. Let's say instead I want to use the left or the right. So that purple panel on the right, let's say that's my base. And let's just add the 3 inches over on that side so it's easier to see how this works. So now our base area is 3 by 8, and the distance between the two left and right sides is our height of 10. Both of those formulas there, 10 times 3 times 8, and 8 times 3 times 10, gives us the same exact answer that we did at the start. Another thing to notice here is often the volume of a rectangular prism is given as length times width times height. You can commonly see this out in the world. If you go to Home Depot and try to figure out how much concrete you need to get, they'll calculate volume. They'll talk about your length, width, and height instead of base area and height. This works, obviously, but it only works for rectangular prisms. So I don't teach length times width times height. I'd rather use base area times height because it'll work in the next problem also. Now we're going to calculate the volume of the triangular prism. So we have to go base area times height, same formula. This time our base is our non-rectangle. That means our base is going to be the triangle. And since it's a right triangle, we can just go ahead and write our formula right now. It's going to be 1/2 times 5 times 12. What is the distance between these two triangles? That would be the 8. Notice the 13 does not get used in the volume formula. Now we go ahead and simplify, and we get 30 times 8, which is 240. and these are centimeters cubed, or cubic centimeters. Let's take a look at what happens when we have a cylinder. We're going to go pi r squared times the height, and our radius is 4. So we have pi times 4 squared, and the height, the distance between the circles, is 6. Now we can go ahead and just start simplifying this and get 16 pi times 6. So that leads to 96 pi cubic feet. Now sometimes you do want to go ahead and convert it to a decimal, and if you do that, don't use 3.14 for pi. You need to find the pi button on your calculator, and you'd go 96 times pi, and that would give you 301.593 cubic feet. Time for some practice problems. When you see the problem, go ahead and hit pause, work it out on your paper, and then go ahead and check your answer. All right, so here we're going to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism, and this is in our surface area video. There's some lines here that should be dotted. Do you see how this thing kind of is messing with your mind a little bit? Let's fix that. There we go. That's what it should look like. You could put the 15 on the bottom if you want, just to be able to use the base on the bottom a little easier. So I'm going to use 15 times 10 as my base area, and then the distance between the top and the bottom is 20. And then we simplify, we get 150 times 20, which leads to 3,000 cubic centimeters. Next problem, go ahead and pause the video. So here we have our volume of a triangular prism, and the key here is just remembering that when you do the formula for the triangle, don't forget your 1/2. That's the most common mistake. And so our base area is going to be 1/2 times 48 times 36. And then the distance between the triangles is 10 for our height. And then when we simplify that, we get 864 times 10. So we get 8,640 cubic meters. Now, we didn't find the hypotenuse of that right triangle. We do not need it for our volume. But if this did ask you for surface area, you'd have to use Pythagorean theorem to find that highlighted hypotenuse there to find surface area of that rectangle you can see. But for volume, we don't need the hypotenuse. Next practice problem. Be careful here. I didn't give you the radius. All right, so that 8 inches there, that is our diameter of 8 inches. But for our formula, we want to know the radius is 4. And then if you want, you can write down the height. The distance between the circles is 12 inches. Now we're ready for our formula. We get the volume is pi r squared times the height. So that gives us pi times 4 squared times 12. And that would be 16 pi times 12, which becomes 192 pi cubic inches. For pure math problems, you can just leave it in terms of pi. And that's it.